How do you think they're going to introduce Doctor Doom into the MCU? I have this crazy theory. A man named Jonathan Majors was casted as the next big bad of the MCU, Kang the Conqueror. But one day, he got into a physical altercation with the woman, and it created an end to his very short MCU spotlight. Disney panicked and asked, "What shall we do?" Disney then hired the Russo brothers back with the biggest paycheck of all time. Then the Russo brothers decided to have Robert Downey Jr. return as Doctor Doom. But the main question is, how is this possible when RDJ was Iron Man? Join me on this episode of Virgin Explains. The multiverse contains endless realities and endless possibilities. Many universes have similarities, but they all have different outcomes. These universes have one factor that must always occur in every universe. This is called a canon event. However, sometimes canon events can be interfered with, which creates drastic consequences. One canon event is the death of Tony Stark, but not just any death, like dying of old age. Tony always dies from being Iron Man. Some deaths are caught off guard, but most of these deaths occur when Tony wields all the Infinity Stones and snaps, sacrificing himself to save his universe. But in a universe far into the multiverse, a different outcome occurs. One that will not only cause consequences to this universe, but to every universe. The Avengers are standing off against the Mad Titan, Thanos. Heroes are desperately trying to stop Thanos from snapping his fingers. Iron Man lays on the floor, damaged and out of options. He looks at Doctor Strange. Strange stares at Tony, then slowly lifts up one finger to Stark. Tony understands the message and realizes there is only one way to end this. Stark picks himself up and launches at Thanos. He attempts and struggles to take the stones away from Thanos, but it's not enough. Thanos backhands Tony, sending him back. Thanos lifts his gauntlet, then snaps. But nothing happens. Thanos swiftly turns his head to Stark. Stark stole the stones from their scuffle and is now wielding them. Tony snaps, turning Thanos and his army into dust. Strange puts his head down in defeat. He knew they won, but at a huge cost. Silence fills the air as Strange waits for the Avengers to see their fallen comrade. But suddenly, Strange hears Iron Man's armor. The nanotech, it's shifting around. Strange snaps his head to Tony and sees Tony's suit go straight to his arc reactor. Once every piece of armor gets into the arc reactor, the reactor glows extremely bright. Tony takes a big inhale, then starts breathing uncontrollably. Hulk immediately picks up Tony and rushes out of the battlefield along with the rest of the heroes. But Strange stands there in absolute shock and uncertainty. Stephen knows that even though his ally survived, this may have doomed us all. Bruce Banner puts Tony on a hospital bed and scans Tony to see how badly damaged he is. Doctor Strange stands in the corner of the operation room, shocked and worried. Bruce then discovers that Tony put the remaining nanotech to his own heart, creating his own arc reactor and keeping him alive. Strange slowly walks up to Tony. All he sees is a horrifically burned body, where the only way to identify that this is Tony Stark was through the other half of his face that wasn't burnt. Strange stared at Tony in absolute horror. Then he remembered one of the outcomes. This outcome would make Thanos look like child's play. The more Strange looked at Tony, the more he heard screams and destruction. A dark thought came to Strange's head. What if he finished the job right here, right now? But what would that outcome bring? And besides, Strange knew he was outnumbered since every Avenger is there waiting to hear about Tony. Strange continued to stare. He knew he was no longer looking at Iron Man. Years fly by and the world is struggling to build itself back together after Tony snapped, bringing half the population back. Tony is also struggling. All this time, he's been trying to recover physically and mentally from the damage of the stones. Tony's PTSD is back, like from the events of Iron Man 3, but this time extremely worse. The powerful and egotistical Tony Stark was now the most powerless and insecure person. Not only was Tony struggling with his health, but also with the Avengers. Black Widow being killed in action, Thor went off-world, Hawkeye went off to retire, War Machine going through investigation after discovering he was a Skrull, Hulk stepping down to be Professor, as seen in the leaked trailer for Brand New Day, Captain America retired, causing Sam to take the shield and side more with the military instead of focusing on rebuilding the Avengers. All Tony had was a picture of him and a kid that he doesn't even remember. Sure, he has Pepper and his daughter, but Pepper was overwhelmed with running Stark Industries since Tony was spending all his time trying to put himself back together. And his poor daughter Morgan was traumatized looking at her dad's face. Things did not look good for Tony, and after the events of Thanos, he felt overwhelmingly obligated to prepare for another attack or put a suit of armor around the world. Then he thought to himself, why reassemble the new Avengers when I could be them all in one? Tony begins doing research on sorcery and how he could learn it. After hours of research, he discovers an ancient place that once had great sorcerers. This place was called Latveria. Tony traveled there with little tech and a green hoodie to disguise himself. He looked around and asked locals about sorcery, but had no luck. Then a man walked up to him and told Tony that he knows exactly what he's looking for. This man was Mordu. Mordu took Tony to a temple and convinced Tony that Latveria needed help. Mordu said to Tony, "I'll teach you everything I know and more if you give me the resources to help this country." Tony agreed, not knowing that Mordu was planning to set him up. Mordu put Tony through intense training and made Tony study endlessly. Tony then started combining his tech into sorcery to give himself an advantage to mastering sorcery. Once Mordu felt like Tony was strong enough, Mordu made Tony absorb powers of very powerful beings, like how Doctor Strange did in What If. Once Tony completed his task, Mordu sees his opportunity to finish what he's been plotting all along. Mordu didn't want to go through the hassle of absorbing these beings. Instead, he wanted Tony to do it for him so Mordu can take his powers like he did at the end credit scene of Doctor Strange. Mordu tries to attack Tony by surprise, but Tony was already 2 steps ahead of him. Mordu couldn't steal his power due to Tony's new super advanced and enchanted suit. Tony then takes Mordu's powers and kills him. Stark then uses magic and technology to build a massive robot army. He spreads his army around the world and declares that he is now the first line of defense and no wars will continue. As Tony heads home, the new Avengers stand ready to face him. They fear that he's become too controlling and must surrender his army. Without hesitation, Tony wipes the floor with these new Avengers. Once the word got out that the Avengers were defeated, other heroes come to try to stop Tony, but one by one, each hero submitted to joining Stark in world domination or died trying to stop him. Finally, Doctor Strange confronts Stark. Strange looked at Stark in horror. His horrific vision came true. Without the Time Stone, Strange did not know what to do to stop this. So Strange decided to submit to Tony Stark. As many wars and many rebellions go by, Tony sits on his throne. Then suddenly, a strange portal opens up in front of him. The TVA walks out of the portal, facing Tony. But they realize they are way too late. The TVA was too busy trying to stop Cassandra Nova from the events of Deadpool and Wolverine to where they couldn't stop Tony in time. An army of TVA soldiers fought Stark, but they were no matched. Tony walked over the TVA bodies and grabbed the device that allows them to make portals. He created a portal straight to the TVA and slaughtered everyone. Tony studied the place and learned everything about the multiverse. He then discovered that he was meant to die when using the Infinity Stones, and none of this was supposed to happen. He finds out he stopped a canon event, but Tony saw it as a sign that he wasn't meant to win, but he beat the odds and became a conqueror. He looked at one of the monitors and saw Loki holding the multiverse together. Tony creates a portal to Loki and tells Loki to surrender the multiverse to him. Loki couldn't recognize the man, so Loki attacks, but Tony is just too powerful and defeats Loki. Loki barely escapes and then flees. Tony then rips the timeline branches apart, causing the biggest incursion and leaving every universe vulnerable. Tony realizes that the only way he can put a suit of armor around the world without people retaliating is to create a world himself. Stark goes back to the monitors and scans almost every universe in the multiverse. He knows that if he wants to create his own universe, he can't do it with just his powers alone. He takes notes of all these powerful beings across the multiverse, then creates a portal somewhere else. Tony walks to the portal and sees a child right in front of him. He kneels down in front of the child and removes his mask. Tony was face to face with Franklin Richards, the first being that would help Tony rebuild his new world.